Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Richard Chizmar, who is a horror author, and he has written some books, several books actually, with Stephen King. And I'm going to let you, Richard, tell everybody about your books that you've written, especially the ones recently.
Sure. Yeah. Most recently, the new one that's just came out a couple of weeks ago is called Gwendy's Final Task, co-written with Stephen King, and it's the third in a trilogy. The first book was published, I think, maybe 5 years ago, Gwendy's Button Box, and then the second follow-up I wrote by myself that was called Gwendy's Magic Feather, and then this third one, which was Steve's idea to jump back in and finish out her character. Just came out February 15th and is doing very well, and we're excited about it. And then other than that, I guess the most recent book of note was came out last September, August. Yeah, Chasing the Boogeyman, and that'll be out this summer in paperback in July. But right now you can still get the hardcover, and it's a novel. It's a fictional novel written in a true crime format. So I tricked a lot of people into thinking these things really happened, and had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, that's been the last year of my life right there. Those two books.
And I hear Chasing the Boogeyman, I hear, is doing really well.
It is. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a very nice surprise.
Yeah, that's great. So for readers unfamiliar with your work, how would you describe what you write?
Um, it's I'll let Stephen King describe it because I've done several press events with him lately, and that's the thing. Usually I'm a solo writer, so it's almost it's a little bit difficult to describe how, my own work. But Steve talked about how I write everyday people, very well, and I think that's why I mesh with him so well. Our sensibilities are similar. We don't tend to write about jet setters or we write about everyday suburban folks who live in neighborhoods and go to work from 9 to 5 and shop at the grocery store and that kind of thing. So I tend to write about, the heart of America and everyday people. And then I kind of inject the bad stuff, and hopefully by then you care about the character so much more that it's even, you're even more on the edge of your seat.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
You know what? I think they're always drawn to it. It's kind of like the same reason people get on roller coasters, I think. And I hate roller coasters, but everyone else in my family loves them. So, but I think it's the quote unquote safe, adventure. You can be scared, you can be, like I said, you can be drawn to the edge of your seat, but at the same time, at the end of the day, you're going to be okay. And so I think for a variety of reasons, part of it's entertainment, which is where the roller coaster comes in, and then escapism too. People, especially this last few years, we've had a rough time of it. The entire world has, and people want to read to get away. Now, some people will say, yeah, but why do you want to read bad stuff? When you could read, light fantasy or a romance or, just a historical book about a better period of time. But I think people, it's the same thing with movies. You want to experience that and come out of the other end, okay. And when you plop down, your money for a book or a movie like that, in the end, you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what was the inspiration for Gwendy's Final Task? Actually, for the whole Gwendy series, and then for Gwendy's Final Task.
Yeah, well, initially, I got to know Stephen King through my publishing business, Cemetery Dance, and knew him for years through working with him on the magazine, and then through various books that we published of his, limited editions. And then at some point, a friendship came out of that, and we don't ever really talk business. We just talk about books and movies and our dogs and our families and our kids, that kind of thing. And at some point, we had an email exchange about round robin books where you have 6 or 7 or 9 or 10 different authors involved. And he wasn't too high on those, but that led up to us talking about collaborations. And he mentioned that he had a story that he had started a while back that he'd never been able to finish. And through some back and forth and emails, the first 30 pages of the story showed up in my email box the next morning. And essentially he said, if you want to take a crack at it, have at it. So I never in a million years dreamed, that would happen. Of course I said yes right away. I read it, and it opens right in Castle Rock, Maine, in his, his sacred territory in the Stephen King universe. And I said yes right away. And then that was on a Friday, and I spent that weekend just terrified because I realized what I had done. I was like, how am I going to write this with Stephen King, my literary hero? And, but once I started writing, it was fine. I was in Castle Rock, and I had been carried away into his world, and everything was it worked out just fine. But so that was kind of the inspiration for the first one. It was his character. It was his idea. Mm-hmm. I wrote a big chunk, sent it back to him. He wrote some, traded back and forth. And that was the first one. The second one I had went to bed one evening watching the news about the diverse new group of people we had in Congress that had just been elected. And I woke up, and I'm not huge in politics, but it was on my mind. And I went to bed, and I must have dreamt it, because I woke up the next morning and I emailed him and I said, Steve, I know exactly what Gwendy's been doing since the end of the first book. She is a newly elected member of Congress, and she returns to her office one day early on, and there's a button box waiting for her. And he loved the idea. And he said, Rich, he said, it's a terrific idea. I'm going to be busy with Holly Gibney for the foreseeable future, but you need to write it. So in my ultimate wisdom, I took that as, Rich, you write the first draft, I'll write the second draft, and make us look good. But that's not what he meant. He just meant you're going by yourself. So I didn't find that out until I was finished. And I had read, at the end of Needful Things, Castle Rock is destroyed. But I resurrected the town. I brought it back. I brought some of his recurring characters into the story. And I never would have been bold enough to do that had I known that I was going solo. I probably would have, bothered him with a bunch of texts and emails saying, Steve, is this okay? Or is this okay? But it didn't work out that way. And it ended up being a happy accident, because, he liked the second book. I was pleased with it. And it's what kind of made us fall in love with Gwendy, the character, all over again. And then the third book, Final Task, that was his idea. He came to me one evening, a bunch of texts. I started receiving texts from Steve, and you could tell he was excited. And he had the idea of where Gwendy would have to ultimately turn to get rid of the button box once and for all, and how it tied into the Dark Tower and a lot of very again, using this word, sacred Stephen King elements and characters and places. So I was just excited to go along for the ride for this last one. And we decided right from the beginning it would be a full-length novel as opposed to like a short mm-hmm. one or a novella. So we took a few months and we traded big chunks of pages back and forth. And not only do we go back to Castle Rock, but we go back to Derry, which is, where the setting for it and several of his other, critically acclaimed books. So yeah, it was a blast from start to finish. And it was just, I still pinch myself sometimes. Did all that really happen?
Just out of curiosity, are you familiar with New England and
Yeah, I have two sons. My oldest son graduated from Colby in Maine last.
Okay.
So he's a lacrosse player. So we looked at a lot of the NESCAC schools, and we spent quite a bit of time visiting, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, so we stayed at a lot of bed and breakfasts and really got to see the areas, because he looked at Tufts and Middlebury and all of those places. So he ended up at Colby in Waterville, Maine. So over those 4 years, we were up there quite a bit. It's an hour from Bangor. Mm-hmm. So we got to visit, Steve's town a lot. And it was a good excuse to go up there a lot. It was to go see my son. So yeah, I'm very familiar with New England.
Great. Okay. So my question is, what kind of research went into writing Gwendy's Final Task?
You know what? The kind that we had someone else much smarter than us do for us. Robin Firth. You're
lucky.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Robin Firth, who I did a lot of research for Steve on various books, but it is mainly his big chronicler of the Dark Tower. You know, she knows more about the Dark Tower than I think there's two people who do know more than Steve himself, and that's Robin and Bev Vincent. And I actually had Bev, read, the various drafts of Gwendy to fact checked for me and Steve. But Robin did all the research. I won't say all. She did 95% of the research, and she sent us links to videos, page after page of text, and really helped us get the stuff. It's not a spoiler for me to say that Gwendy's Final Task, a big chunk of it takes place on a space station, which might sound weird. It sounded weird to me in the beginning because I remember Steve told me his great idea. And it involved outer space and space travel, and it involved Gwendy suffering from a debilitating disease. And I didn't really know much about either. So again, I was intimidated all over again. I wasn't intimidated by the writing because been there, done that. It was so much fun. I wasn't, scared this time. But the setting, I remember telling my wife, goodness gracious, it's got to be space, which I know, little to nothing about. But Robin saved us, and she made sure that we came off as, mostly intelligent. And Steve, God bless him, I remember a couple of times I said, well, what if this, what if that? And he said, Rich, that's when we just make it up. So that's the fun of being a writer.
That's true. Wow. You're very lucky that you were able to have somebody else do the research. That's amazing. Did you do research for any of your own books? Like Chasing the Boogeyman?
Yeah. I did some research. I mean, because it's based on, even though the murders in that book never happened, it was based on some incidents, some home invasions. Where an incident took place, and not incident. And again, this goes back to the research. There were a number of break-ins in my hometown back in the late 80s. And the newspaper called the man who did this. They ended up calling him the Phantom Fondler because he would break into suburban houses in my neighborhood, in my town. And he would caress the hair or like the leg or the arm of sleeping women. And then when they woke up, he would bolt from the house and disappear into the night. And that was kind of the catalyst, because I had moved home for 9 months after I graduated from college. I had moved back to my parents' house. I was engaged just to save money before the wedding. And I remember it happening. I remember the headlines in the newspaper. I remember people being scared and on edge. And to me, I was always waiting as someone, very focused on the crime and horror worlds. I remember always waiting for the crimes to escalate and for it to be worse. Fortunately, that didn't happen. But so, yeah, when I started the book, I went back and did some research on those incidents. And the biggest shock for me was that I had remembered it as happening 4 or 5 times, because how many times could someone break into homes and get away? But in reality, it happened over 30 times. So this guy was like a phantom in the night. And he was never caught for those crimes. He was arrested 5, 6, 7 years later in Baltimore City for an unrelated crime, and that's how they tied him to that string of crimes. But yeah, that was research, and then a lot of research about serial killers in general and police procedural. I talked to a lot of people who I know who are police officers and detectives, that kind of thing. But I go by Steve's rule. I like, in that book, it was important. Most of my stories, I tend to, I like to do minimal research and make up as much as I can. So, but you want to give the reader an authentic feel. And because this was supposed to be, modeled after a true crime book, I really did have to try to get the nuts and bolts correct.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So what was the biggest challenge in writing and putting out, Gwendy's Final Task?
Strangely enough, the writing went as smooth as could be. I mean, no hiccups. We just bounced back and forth. We finished it very quickly. We finished the editing process very quickly. That was nothing but fun, as it should have been. And then you think, as a publisher, and I've said this a few times to close friends, I said, well, not only are you publishing a new Stephen King book as a publisher, which is exciting, but your name is on there as a co-writer. So it should be nothing but a joyous occasion. But because of the supply chain issues, trying to print 100,000 copies of a 400-page hardcover. Usually I tell people, usually our books take anywhere from 6 weeks to maybe 10 weeks to full turnaround at the printer. Even for a large print run like this, it's never taken more than 2 or 3 months. In this case, we had printers telling us, we had some who we just had to not even consider because they told us it was going to take 7 to 9 months, because of manpower shortages, but mainly because of paper shortages. So we ended up, in order to meet our publication date in February, and in order to fulfill all the purchase orders that had come in from the independent bookstores, the chain bookstores, Amazon, Ingram, Baker and Taylor, we had to use 3 different printers, 2 different paper stocks, 2 different dust jacket stocks. We had to cobble together a print run in order to get those 100,000 copies. And it's a miracle that we were able to do it. It's a miracle that we didn't have to delay publication. You see a lot now, even with the New York publishers, a lot of the books are being bounced back anywhere from 2 to 6 or 8 months. It just happened to a good friend of mine yesterday. He found out that it's not going to be a 2022 book. Now it's spring 2023. So yeah, that was the biggest challenge. And in the end, we were able to get it done and with minimal, issues. So we're very, very grateful for that. But it wasn't as much fun as it should have been on the publishing side.
Mm-hmm. So what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, I just signed a 2-book deal with Simon & Schuster Gallery, which is they're the same fine folks who published Gwendy and also Chasing the Boogeyman. The first one's going to be actually a direct sequel to Chasing the Boogeyman. I have one more story related to that to tell. I had so much fun writing about my hometown and writing about actual family and friends. And even though the first one was set back in the 80s, so everyone was alive and together then, my parents were alive. I was living with them. It was such a joy to write. This one will be set in present day, so it'll be a little bit different. Little Silence of the Lambs, where essentially someone who's incarcerated is either helping or not helping, at just appearing to help, solve crimes that are ongoing in present day. So I'm excited to write that. I'm going to write it in the same format, a lot of photographs. The Chasing the Boogeyman had over 50 black and white photographs, and which went a very long way to convincing people that it was real.
I can imagine.
So
yeah.
I'm gonna go, take the same angle on the second one, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm writing that now. And then the second book is going to be a suburban thriller, kind of in that Harlan Coben category, which I really enjoy doing. So that's what's next for me. And people ask all the time, will there be another Gwendy? And I always just say, well, this one, completed her lifespan, but there's a lot of room in between the first and second and third book. So I'm not saying that Steve and I might not wake up with an idea one morning and decide to go back into Gwendy's world again. I would love that.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure some of the readers would too.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking. A lot of people are just saying, you got to figure out a way to bring her back. So I would really enjoy it.
Okay. I now have some questions for you about being a writer. What's your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Oh, I enjoy the process, unlike some writers who I think, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's no different than any other career. I think some writers enjoy being a writer more than they enjoy doing the writing. It's an unusual business. It's fairly unique, and that sort of thing. But I actually like the writing process. I like, when I'm into a story, I'm completely consumed by it. And the real world, and I'm a fortunate guy. My real world is a pretty wonderful world, but it disappears for a while, and I'm in that story. And everyone knows, my wife and kids and friends know that you're going to have to ask Rich the same question 3 or 4 times in order to get it through his head, because he's in la la land. But I enjoy that. And as far as kind of taking a deeper dive, I love the happy accidents in writing. I love when things tie together. When something that you wrote on page 40 is an integral part of the story on page 240, and you had no idea that was going to happen. And that those kind of happy accidents happen a lot with me. And I'm always upfront. I always say on podcasts or when I do interviews, I'm like, no, I wish, someone will bring something up and I'll say, I wish I could claim to be, such an intricate plotter that I had that in mind from the very beginning, but it just fell in my lap. And I tend to not look too closely at those happy accidents because I feel like, you start doing that and maybe they'll stop happening. So that's the biggest kind of singular joy of writing for me, is when those things happen and you don't know, is it magic or is it your subconscious working? I don't know. And I don't want to know. I just want them to keep happening.
So you're a pantser?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, like with Boogeyman, the ideas came so quickly that fairly early on, I had to stop and write them down. And by writing them down, it almost became an outline. And I got to tell you, that helped me write that book so quickly because they just boom. But the only reason I wrote them down is because I've learned my lesson. And that is, I cannot be one of those people who says that idea is so great, I'll never forget it. Because 2 hours later, I'm hitting myself in the head going, what was it? But yeah, for the most part, I'm a pantser, and working with Steve, definitely, the same thing. He's not a big outliner or anything like that. So it's kind of like we're going to fly by the seat of our pants. So hang on.
Okay. So what's been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Well, you know what? It's also, well, I won't surprise people because I've answered that question before. I was going to say, most people think, how can anything be grander than working with Stephen King, whose work as a teenager and a young adult was honestly responsible for me doing this. Without his novel It, and without The Monkey, which my 10th grade English teacher brought to class for us to read out loud, and both of those experiences kind of opened doors for me where I thought, this is what I want to do. So how can something be more special than kind of going full circle and working with that gentleman? But I wrote a novella called Widow's Point with my son, Billy, my older son. And again, when you talk, I've always been a dreamer, and I say this, I'm like, I've dreamt an awful lot of big things. I've dreamt about publishing Stephen King. I've dreamt about one day having a son and, various things, but I've never dreamt about writing with those folks. And the idea that I was able to write a novella with my son, who was 19 at the time, he's wow. 23 now, but he was in college. We wrote this novella about a haunted lighthouse. It did really well. It sold to a half a dozen foreign countries now, and it was turned into a low budget movie. So yeah, that nothing has topped that. And it's probably, no matter what I do from here on out, it's probably going to be difficult to top that experience. But he and I are going to write a prequel to Widow's Point, and we're going to write a sequel to Widow's Point. So there's more of that adventure to come.
Wow. So what's the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
Oh, wow. I'm kind of old fashioned, and it's a lesson that I learned a long time ago, from my father. I've been fortunate that I grew up in the town of Edgewood, which was showcased in Chasing the Boogeyman, a working class town, a lot of fortune, just a really blessed group of guys who we all grew up with our fathers and, our mothers. We were fortunate that we had 2-parent families. We were fortunate that we had good examples kind of showing us the way. And, the biggest thing that I've learned is just that, I learned back then was that there was kind of no shortcut to success. It was just the secret, which was out there for everyone to know, but still felt like a secret, was just that hard work. Nothing kind of replaced that. Mm-hmm. And that applies to writing. I tell people all the time, it's old fashioned advice, but you kind of have to treat it like any other job. And that is, expect it to be a long process to success. Expect there to be a lot of road bumps, a lot of pitfalls, and a lot of days of rejection and kind of questioning yourself. And it's the folks who believe in themselves and just keep pushing forward, taking the best bits and pieces of advice that they can from various places and people and books, but also believing in their own voice and the message that they have to tell. And if I believe that if you just keep pushing that forward, that you will find whatever level of success it is. That's a pretty subjective term, but yeah, I always tell people, just sit your butt down and write, and expect it not to be easy. Because if it was easy, so many people would be doing it, and they're not. So yeah, it's old fashioned, and there's some cliches in there, but it's like I always say, there's a reason they're cliches, and that's because most of the time they're true.
So is that the main piece of advice that you would offer for other writers?
Yeah, I always just say it's even with self-publishing, and even with the all the shortcuts that exist now, as far as desktop publishing and all those things that didn't exist back in the dinosaur days when I came up in the 80s and 90s. Even with all that, it is a long process. Unless you get very, very lucky and catch lightning in a bottle, it's a long process. So expect that, and just accept all those bruises and bumps that I talked about as kind of your badge of honor, because we all have them. The Stephen Kings of the world, you've heard all about him, getting a check arriving just in time to keep the electricity on, and his wife pulling the manuscript for Carrie out of the trash can. Those aren't made up stories. They really happened. And most successful writers have stories like that, so that's it. It's just, to me, have that thick skin and have that stubborn side of you that's just going to keep pushing you forward.
Right. Great. So are there any clubs or groups or organizations that you'd recommend to other writers that have helped you in your career?
It's interesting. Back when I started, there were like newsletters, like marketing newsletters, like Scavenger's newsletter, which was this little fold out thing, staple thing that came in the mail every month. I don't think it was every week. And again, back then it was Writer's Digest had a fiction market and a nonfiction market guide. That was the Bible. You would buy it every spring when it came out. I think it was spring, the new edition. And I still have my copy somewhere around here. But now with the internet, there's all these different pages. I don't belong to these pages, but I've told my son to seek them out. There's crime groups, there's horror, there's mystery, there's cozy mysteries, there's pretty much whatever genre you're looking for. There are multiple pages that exist on Facebook and other social media, and it's a collective. It's kind of a gathering of similar minds, and they talk about marketing and as with anything else, when there's a large group of people, you got to take the positive out of there and kind of try to ignore the negative and the drama in that. But I don't, as for myself, I'm so busy doing these things that I don't, I pop in when I'm invited to do a talk or to do a Q&A, that kind of thing. But other than that, I kind of just like I'm a solo, guy, and kind of just, keep pushing myself forward and do what I got to do. But that's why I'm so far behind. Like I couldn't tell someone what are the best markets to submit to right now. I'm just like, go to the internet, you'll find it.
Right. Okay. Now I have questions about you as a person.
Sure.
What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
That's interesting. There's probably, I've always been pretty private. I don't get out to a lot of conventions and shows like that. So I always want to say, they don't know that much. But now I've done so much press over the last 5 years. It's like, they probably do. Let's see. I was an All-American lacrosse player in college. That's always a good one, because it doesn't get brought up too much. But yeah, lacrosse was a passion of mine, playing in high school and then college. And that was actually when it came out. I had just decided to stop playing lacrosse after years of playing, and it had kind of become my identity because I was good at it and I was on scholarship, and I was just tired of being hurt all the time of these injuries, and I was, it was taking too much of my life, and I decided to walk away. And that's when It came out by Stephen King, and it kind of saved me because I was very lost after I walked away from the game, and It came out, and I remember savoring those last 100 pages and kind of piecing them out 10 a day so it would last longer. But when I finished, I wasn't lost anymore. I was like, you know what? I need to start writing again. And I did. I started writing for the college newspaper. And then within months, I was writing and selling short stories to the horror and crime magazines. So yeah, I tell Steve that often. I'm like, that book saved me.
Interesting. And it looks like your hat looks almost like fencing. Is that what it is? The V?
It's Virginia. It's Cavaliers. My youngest son
Ah,
is a
okay.
freshman at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and he plays lacrosse. So that's where we are every weekend. It's either in
Cross.
Charlottesville to watch a game or we're traveling. We'll be heading down to Chapel Hill, North Carolina on Thursday for a game. But both my sons played lacrosse. My older son's a writer. My younger son is not a big reader or writer. His interests lie elsewhere, but he's very talented.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask if your son was a writer too. You mentioned something about that.
Yeah, Billy. My
Yeah.
older son Billy just started his own Patreon page where he's posting, novel excerpts and short stories and short films that he's
Great.
directed, and so he's all in. He graduated from Colby and really enjoyed his experience, and now he wants to go in this direction like Dad did. So I told him, as long as he knows, he's heard it his whole life, and that is what I said before. Just as long as you're, willing to do the work, you'll be fine. And my younger one, like I said, he's a freshman and he's more interested in the business side of things. And I'm very blessed to find young men who are doing well.
That's great. So, what is or are your passions when you're not writing?
My family, we follow, like I said, that's essentially our life for the next 4 years. We'll be following in this every spring. We'll be following them around, watching all their games, and as far as what I do, I'm pretty boring. I like to fish, play golf with my friends from time to time, play cards, work out a little bit, and just bury myself in books and movies.
Okay. And what does your writing space look like?
I don't know if you can see it, but this is my office at home. There's books everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But and then on that side of the room is a couch, and there's storage back there. I'm interesting. I'm not interesting. It's interesting. But because once I'm into a story, like I alluded to earlier, I can write anywhere. I can write in the car while my wife is driving us to, somewhere. I can take in my computer and write at lunch if I wanted to. Once I'm in, the story has its hooked in me. Yeah, I can write at the dining room table while the rest of the family's running around and there's a TV on and all that. But this is my quiet place. This is, it's a big, room above a 4-car garage, and it's quiet. It's kind of off to itself. And this is where most of it gets done.
Do you have to have something to eat or drink with you when you're writing?
You know what? No, but I have an appetite like a teenager, so there usually isn't. I do have a little fridge up here, and it's usually not far from my mind. But yeah, no, I'm again. It's not a lot of kind of rules to it for me. People ask, do you listen to music? And I'm like, no, I don't usually listen to music. But with that said, I've written an awful lot of words in public places that have music, or again, at my dining room table while the rest of the world goes on around me. So I'm sure there's been music, there's been conversations, there's the television and all of that. But yeah, I'm fortunate in that regard.
Oh, that's great. Now, writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions and to help them through their work. And do you have any, and do they help or hinder you with your work?
Oh, usually help. We have 4 dogs.
Oh, wow.
We've always been big, large dog people. We've had golden retrievers and other large breeds. And we had and I cannot remember what kind of dogs they were, but we had two siblings, Boo and Zoe, and they, lived fine, long lives and passed away recently. And their surviving little sister, Cujo, which was a little white poodle looking thing, which we named Cujo, ironically. We loved her so much, and it was a big discovery for us that small dogs were also such a delight, almost like a baby in some ways. So she really, she really opened our eyes to that world. So then we bought, we brought home another little girl called Ripley. And again, a little black furry, what are they? A golden doodle, something like that, or a micro golden doodle. So just like a little 10-pound thing. And then when my youngest son, Noah, the summer that he was going away to school this last summer, my older son, who moved back home for a while after graduating from Colby, he wanted a dog. So he bought a big, 60 pounds, it's 60, 70 pounds already. And at the same time, we thought, you know what? Well, there's never a better time to buy two at the same time because they grow up together. So we got a brown looking golden doodle thing. So we have three little ones and then a big one that run around here. And they're our family. And my wife and I look at each other all the time and say, this is, once Noah graduates from college and is on his way, and Billy is on his way, this is what our immediate family will look like every day. So yeah, I love the pups. They, we're fortunate that we have some acreage and a pond. And so they don't know any other life than being able to run and chase the geese and, that kind of thing. So yeah, we're, again, very fortunate.
So do they help you write?
Sometimes they again, one of the, great discoveries about these small dogs is they love to cuddle. So if I'm sitting anywhere that they can get on me, they want to be on me. So that's fine with one. It's usually fine with two, but if it's more than that, I have a hard time working. So yeah, sometimes I have to hide from them a little bit, but yeah, no, they help me. They help me stay sane and happy. So they certainly do help. That's, again, we're dog people. We're big animal people. And so we never underestimate how, the amount of joy that they bring to our lives.
That's very true. Yeah. Okay. Now I have just two more questions for you. One is, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, of course? And yes. I'm gonna give a plug.
Okay, good. Please do it.
I'm gonna give a little plug. Okay. I figured you might. Everybody does.
Yeah, I will online for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's the nice thing is some of my, earlier work or some of my collections, short story collections that aren't, you're not going to find those in most bookstores. So that those are pretty much the internet, buying online from the publishers or from eBay or from, independent bookstores. But, with Boogeyman and the Gwendy books, you can pretty much find them wherever books are sold. I mean, that's, depending on what edition, but if it's the hardcovers, which are out now, then yeah, independent bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, BAM, Books A Millions, any of those. The nice thing about the trade paperbacks is they show up in many more places like Walmart and Target and airports and all of that. And so, yeah, this summer will be interesting because the Boogeyman, Gwendy's Final Task comes out quickly in trade paperback. That was just the way we structured the deal, but that comes out like June 1st. And then 6 weeks later, in the middle of July, Boogeyman comes out in trade paperback. So that'll be neat to see those, together in a lot of bookstores.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. My last question is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Despite being a fairly, secluded person who doesn't get out much, I've embraced social media. That's the neat thing is I kind of had to be pulled into social media, 10 years ago or maybe less, kind of kicking and screaming. And then, within a year, I was like, this is great. I reestablished, relationships with guys I played lacrosse with back in the day and friends I grew up with who had, fallen out of touch. And then I met this amazing group of readers who, we all enjoyed Stephen King and we all enjoyed, Dean Koontz and Ray Bradbury and other writers. And then, as my career has grown, this amazing group of readers who actually enjoy my work, which is just a wonderful thing. So yeah, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and there's a richardchizmar.com, which someone helps me with, which, is pretty up to date. Anytime a new article comes out or anything like that, it's put up there. This interview, they'll put the link up there so people can find it at their bookstore. And, but yeah, social media, I do a lot of, on Facebook and Twitter. Instagram, I'm still figuring out, but On Twitter, especially, I do book giveaways all the time. I just gave away a set of first editions of all 3 Gwendy books, which I signed, and we just gave that away last night.
Great.
Occasionally I'll give away a signed Stephen King book, which always draws a lot of attention. And it's, I like to interact with the readers and hear what they liked and sometimes what they didn't like. But I've been fortunate, a great group of people and very, very little drama. Somebody asked me, how do you deal with all the, and I'm like, I haven't had negativity. It's, I can count the people on one hand who I've blocked in 10 years. Just a bunch of like-minded people who have kind of watched my kids grow up because, I'll post pictures and, that kind of thing. And it's a very much of a family, atmosphere. And they've helped my book. They've helped my books, immensely. And it's not why I do it. Yeah. But anytime something good happened, Chasing the Boogeyman surprised everyone and made the New York Times bestseller list. And it's the first thing I told them is thank you. You guys, you all did this, taking book plates to stores and telling your friends about it and spreading the word. I was shocked, and it was neat to have that kind of help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really funny because I've heard from a lot of people, and what I found myself is that the whole book community is a real community.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, especially each genre is its own community too, but the book community as a whole, it is kind of a community.
For sure. I mean, and like I said, I've been so fortunate that it's a community with just a lot of very sensible, caring, warm people who can discuss, likes and dislikes, and there's plenty of people who love the new Dean Koontz book, and then there's plenty of people over here who couldn't stand it. But it's a civil, normal, nice conversation, and it's just interesting to see. And I think it helps in many ways. I think it helps remind, especially creators, that everything really is this subjective thing where no matter what you do, you're going to have a certain segment of the audience who loves it and another part who dislikes it and another part who's kind of somewhere in the middle. So you just have to remain true to your own vision and write what makes you happy. And then, hopefully that matches up and finds an audience.
I think that's a really important point, is just write what makes you happy. I think that's great.
And that is the other, just really quickly, when you talk about writing advice, that is actually the other big piece of advice I always try to give, which is, in my 20s, I was trying to write what I thought other people wanted, editors, readers. And it wasn't until I matured a little bit that I really started to find my voice, is when I kind of made the decision to write what I wanted to write what was important to me, no matter how small of a moment it was, or it might've been about a character I saw while I was driving down the street, standing at a payphone when those used to exist. And I imagined what this young woman holding the hand of a child, what her backstory was. And I spent a day or two writing it. And when I started writing honestly, and I started writing about things that mattered to myself, to me, that's when I was able to find an audience. And that's when I took a big leap as a writer, when I stopped writing, stories that I thought this editor might want to buy. And instead I started writing stories that meant something to me. So yeah, I always tell writers, it's a leap, because you have to have some courage to do that, because it's a strange thing to think, why would the rest of the world care what I think? But as a writer, that's what you have to offer. So that's the other big piece of advice I always give, is trust that. And it's not easy.
That's great. Well, that's all I have. And thank you so much for joining me. And
my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
And if you ever get to the Boston area or the Worcester area, actually, we'd love to have you come over to the store.
Oh, I will. My son was just at a Tufts lacrosse game last weekend up there. So he wasn't far. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not too far. Not too far. So anyway, thanks very much. And we will be hearing from you, I'm sure.
Yes, I will. And I will pass this on once I get a link. I'll let everybody know where to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.